June is Men's Mental Health Month, and while conversations around maternal mental health have grown in recent years, paternal mental health often remains in the shadows. Studies show that about 1 in 10 fathers experience postpartum depression, yet it often goes unrecognized or unspoken. Today, I'm joined by Chris Rose, who bravely shares his experience with postpartum depression. Whether you're a new dad, a partner, or simply someone who cares about supporting mental wellness in families, I think you'll find Chris's story both eye-opening and encouraging. Hi, I'm Allison Egidi, a pediatric sleep and wellness coach and a mom of 2. I love to help parents find solutions. This is How Long Till Bedtime. Well, hi, Chris. I'm really grateful you're joining me here today. We connected through Postpartum Support International, and I'm so glad that they helped bring us together. Before we dive in, could you tell the listeners a bit about who you are, your family, your work, or anything else that you'd like to share?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for having me. I am a first-time pandemic dad. My daughter was born during the pandemic, and I have a little girl. Her name is Sybil Rose, and she just turned 4 about November. And me and my wife have been together for, God, 15 years now. Seems like forever, to be honest. I'm a senior producer in the video game industry, and I live out in San Francisco.
Awesome. And so you mentioned that you became a dad during the pandemic, which obviously added an entirely new layer of stress and isolation. So, can you walk us through what the early days of fatherhood were like for you and when you started to realize that you weren't feeling like yourself?
Yeah, man, like thinking back to those days, it was hard. I always kind of joke that like the first like 3 months of being a dad during that time, like it just felt like one giant week. I don't remember like I don't have memories of like Thanksgiving or Christmas or even New Year's. Like those months are all kind of just like jumbled up in my brain because of just the journey through postpartum depression and things like that. But it was rough. When my daughter was first born, my wife was a week late, and my daughter in her nature, she just came late. She was about a week, and we got induced on Friday night. Saturday morning, my daughter was born around 11 a.m., and then Sunday night, I was at home with my daughter.
Wow.
That was the turnaround. It felt like we were in like some sort of like fast food place where it's just like, all right, she's born, you're out of here now. So it was tough because like as a new parent, you don't know what questions to ask. I didn't know what questions to ask. My wife and I, our old medical provider at the time, they suggested or said we had to do this class on birthing, and it didn't really give us any information. The only part of the whole thing I remember is there was like this elderly lady who was like straddling one of those bouncing medicine ball, like those big balls
Uh-huh.
that you sit on, and then she was like making birthing noises. Like that's all we remember from that class. Like, and it was like a 2-hour class, and it was just but there was like no information on like these are what you need to look out for. This is what you should do pre-birth, post-birth, and then moving on. It was just like, yeah, you're gonna feel uncomfortable and you're gonna make these noises, and it was like, okay, but what about information? So I never even heard of postpartum depression until later on, like until like 4 or 5 months later after my daughter was born, right? And so
Yeah.
those first few weeks were really rough because like my daughter had latching problems. So when my wife would try to breastfeed her, my daughter wouldn't latch. So we were constantly at the doctor's. We were probably at the doctor's 2 to 3 times a week. And
Mm,
and it felt like we were just like frequent flyer miles at that point because we were just
right.
like, we saw the same people. They're like, oh, you guys are back. Oh, it's the Roses. Look who's here. And it was like, yeah, but we don't want to be here. We want to be at home. We want to be,
Yeah.
building this family. And we were just going through so much trouble. Like the feeding issues were turning into stress, was turning into anxiety, was turning into anger. On my wife's side, she's feeling the same thing, but she's feeling it from the mom's perspective of like
Mm-hmm.
inadequacy and like things like why isn't my body reacting to my child, and then she's going through also like when she started to pump, she was going through the competition of pumping, right? Where it was like, am I making enough? How come I made this much yesterday, but I'm not making this much today? And so it just started to spiral us for like a good month and a half. And so like for that first month and a half, it was so rough because we were up late. My daughter wasn't eating, so she was losing weight. And so my daughter, when she was born, was like 9 pounds. She was a big baby.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things they don't tell you is that your child is going to lose weight because they're no longer attached to the mom. So it's
Mm-hmm.
normal for the baby to lose weight and drop down a certain percentage in weight. But they, like our medical providers, I don't know if it was just them, but they were like freaking out. And she didn't lose that much weight. She only lost about a pound. So she was like down maybe a pound and a half. So she was like down from 9 pounds to like 8 to 7.5 ish. So she's still relatively in a healthy range. And so like we went super like crazy about like we bought scales. So we were weighing her before she ate.
Mm-hmm.
Then we would
Mm-hmm.
feed her and then we'd weigh her again. It just got so hard.
Yeah.
And we didn't have much of a support system at the time
Mm-hmm.
because it was the pandemic. So like my parents, my in-laws couldn't come up relatively like at all because we were all locked down. We were trying to do social distancing and things like that, and it just got really really tough. I would say that first month and a half.
And, we've talked a lot on this podcast about maternal mental health. And so I think anyone who's listening to this has probably listened to some of those episodes. But I'm curious, as you're watching your wife go through the mental hurdles of struggling with feeding, and which I've been through and many listeners have, what were you feeling during that time?
I helpless. There's nothing I can do as a dad. Like I'm trying to support my wife as best as I can, and whatever she chooses to do. Like I come from not bottle feeding, but formula feeding,
Mm-hmm.
and so like I know I don't have a preference either way, whether it's quote unquote breast is best or formula feeding, like a mixture of the two. Like I feel like whatever is right for the individual is what they should choose to do. But our medical provider was very much pushing the agenda of breast is best, formula only kind of use formula. So what we would do is, and one of the techniques that I learned was like finger feeding, right? So like I would finger feed my daughter just to give my wife a break. And so like it did help me in that sense of like bonding more with my daughter
Mm-hmm.
because I was able to actually feed her like formula or breast milk that my wife had pumped, but still felt very helpless that like, my wife is going through this internal struggle, but there's nothing I can do to like alleviate that because I don't have that function. So I don't know what
Yeah.
it's like. I don't know what it's like. Right.
Right.
And I can say like, oh, it's okay, don't worry about it. But really it's like you are worrying about it because as a mother, and again, I'm not a mother, I'm only a father, but like I can tell that like it's important to have that connection, that bond with the baby, and I don't want her to feel like she was missing out. But it was very hard for me, and I would sit
Yeah.
in my office like in the dark, just like with my head in my hands, like, oh please latch, please, and I would just pray that she would latch so that we would get some sort of, at least for this feeding, some sort of comfort, and we can just kind of move on to the next issue and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think I've had fathers on before who didn't struggle so much themselves, but had wives who struggled with postpartum depression and anxiety. And I think that was the common theme for them, was just the feeling of helplessness on how to support their wife. And I'm curious, what were your, beyond feeling helpless, your symptoms of postpartum depression and anxiety, which I know at the time you didn't know you were having, but I would love to hear what your symptoms were and if there was a specific moment or experience that really stood out to you, even if it's in hindsight where you were like, wow, that was wild.
Yeah, definitely. So I am a survivor, I like to say, of postpartum rage, anxiety, OCD, depression. And really, those were never my characteristics as a kid. Like, I was kind of like a go happy, go lucky, like nothing bothered me. I was always kind of just very level headed. When things went wrong, I kind of just like brushed it off and like moved on. But I couldn't do that with this because of like, this is my daughter, this is my child. Like, those feelings, I think feel like it was a journey that I had to fight through to be able to do that. There's a couple of like, you can see like benchmarks where kind of like, now that I can reflect, I see where they happen. The biggest one though, and I'll never forget it, and I still kind of think about it every time it comes up. Almost like a celebration at this point, but it was December 19th, and it was like 2 o'clock in the morning. My daughter is just bawling because she won't sleep. She's probably hungry. She's a baby, she can't talk. And I'm taking the night shift and trying to give my wife whatever little bit of rest I could give her during this time. And so it's like 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'm holding my daughter in my living room, and we have the Christmas tree up, which I have no idea how we got the Christmas tree up that year. The lights are on. It's actually beautiful. We had just moved into our house that year, and so we're in this new home. We have the Christmas tree up. We have presents around the tree. The lights are glowing. The house looks beautiful, and I'm just sitting there crying, like full blown, just like tears running, like it looked like a waterfall on my face. And I'm just talking to my daughter, telling her like, I'm sorry, like I don't know if I can do this. I'm sorry that I'm failing you, like I don't know what to do. And so I'm like pleading my soul into my daughter, just telling her like, I'm sorry that your dad is not strong. And
Mm-hmm.
so me and my daughter are just sitting on the couch, walking back and forth in the living room, and we're both just crying, and we're just like rocking each other and soothing each other. And then finally, things kind of settle, and I'm sitting on the couch with her on my shoulder and just holding her, rocking her, and just doing what I can to soothe her. But that's one of the moments where I just like, there's something wrong. Like, I don't know what it is, but there is something wrong. And yeah, and so that's one of them. That's probably the biggest one that stands out to me.
Yeah. And I'm curious in that moment, at that time, you said your wife was struggling with the feeding. Was she in a better place, or was she struggling? And then how were you feeling about the ability to talk to her about your own struggles, knowing what she was also going through?
Yeah, she was definitely struggling at the same time. I think we both kind of, they say that 50% of partners whose partners experiencing postpartum depression are also going to experience it as well, right? So that's a huge statistic that like we don't know about as dads or as partners. And so my wife she's also going through her own, you know, journey through this as well, and we're trying to talk, but we don't know the words on how to express it because we're looking at it from different lenses. We're looking at it from like, oh, are you just upset? What's going on? Why are you yelling at me? Why am I now yelling at you? And so it became a battle. There were nights where it was just like a fight. We're just yelling at each other for no real reason. And then it's like, then cooler heads prevail, and then we work through it like we would, a normal fight. And then we move on. But it would seem like these would come out of nowhere, and it would be like the smallest thing would spark, conflict between the two of us. Me and my wife always had we had, I would say, great communication. We talk about pretty much everything. Everything was always open on the table, but we didn't recognize the symptoms in each other because we didn't know about the symptoms. We didn't know that this is what it is, that this is what we're going through. And I think that's like the hardest problem, is that like our medical provider at the time was not helping us, and we're struggling. And so for me, I kind of put my feelings on the back burner, right? Like, and I think a lot of dads do this, is where our problems are not as um prolific as our partners. The mother, we want to take care of the mom first and then ourselves, right? And so like we don't feel like our problems are the same as theirs, so we tend to like, it's okay, I'm okay, I'm fine, I'll just hold on to it, and then we'll talk about it later.
Yeah.
And you're doing yourself a disjustice doing that to yourself.
I'm curious, did you have any friends during that time where, or family members, where when you're feeling like I need to prioritize my wife and her well-being, was there anyone behind the scenes that you were like, dude, I am really struggling? Or did you feel very isolated when your healthcare providers aren't able to spot what's going on and you're not really sure what's going on? Did you confide in anyone else, or were you basically in isolation on that?
Yeah, I was just isolated, and it was, and again, it's hard because you're in the pandemic, so it's like you can't. You could talk to somebody on the phone, but you need that kind of like that sit down, that like face to face with somebody. People would ask us like how we're doing, and and again, I think this goes to society is like we would put on the front of like, oh, everything's fine. It's hard, but it's fine. And then, when we would bring up like, oh, it's been really rough lately, everyone's like, oh, that's just the baby blues. Or,
Right.
oh, you guys will get through it. It's okay. Don't worry about it. Like being a parent is beautiful and, it's hard, but, don't worry about it. And it's like, no, being a parent is hard and, sometimes it sucks. Like
Yeah.
that's, that's the real truth about it. And it's not to say that I say that jokingly because like, being a parent is something that I've always wanted to be growing up. Like I wanted to have a child. I couldn't wait to have a kid. I was extremely happy when I found out that I was going to be a dad. It's the greatest privilege I ever had. But like, yeah, it's hard, and like
Right.
you don't get that from people. You get the kind of like the sugar coat or the it's okay, the pat on the back, like you'll get through this. It's just a rough patch. It's like no, like rough patches turn into very long journeys if you don't attend to them.
Right. And what was the turning point? And when did you learn about the fact that you might be suffering from anxiety and depression and it was related to your postpartum journey? I'm curious what really changed your path.
So I would say it all kind of started around July of 2021. My wife had essentially like a mental breakdown at work. She was still going into an office, and she was still working. Her maternity leave had ended in February, and so she was going back to work. And so I was starting my paternity leave because we decided to stagger it. And so like during that time, I was at home with my daughter pretty much every day. And then at some point, I think around April, I went back to work. So I was still at home with my daughter and working full time at home. And my wife was going into the office, and she was driving from. We live in the East Bay, and she was driving. If for any listeners who are familiar with the Bay Area, it's not an easy drive. You're going from the East Bay to San Francisco, and she had a mental breakdown at work. And her job, instead of being sympathetic, they kind of poured gasoline on it, and so she quit. And so I fully supported the decision. I said, you have to do what's right for your mental health. You don't need to put up with that,
Mm-hmm.
stuff. So she quit, and so we began figuring out like she's gonna stay at home, be a stay at home mom. She's gonna we're gonna work through this. But as we started to go through that journey of and the transition, it became very very tough, and we started to like research. She started to research more about like mental health, and she was trying to get in like an appointment with her physician and her at our medical provider at the time, and they ghosted her. Like she had an appointment one day because she was just full on like she needed to talk to somebody, anybody. And so they had a she had a meeting with a therapist, and they just didn't show up.
Oh my gosh.
And she just like she needed it, and they said they couldn't get her a therapist to talk to. I think it was like 2 weeks. And it's like, no, I need help now. Like,
Yeah.
what are you guys doing? Like, how are you not like you go to them for a broken bone or a sprained foot and you're seen right away, but mental health issues, they're like, are you sure? And it's like, no, what do you like? Treat me as if I was like I'm broken right now. Like mentally, I am broken. And fast forward, we were able to. My wife is a very determined person, and she's not going to let it beat her. So she ended up finding Postpartum International through Facebook, I think it was.
So she had to find it on her own.
She found it on her own. she searched and she was looking for just like support groups for moms. She found a really wonderful app for new moms called Peanut, where you can kind of start where you can like link up with other moms in your neighborhood and maybe form up like a play date and just kind of like have that interaction. But yeah, so she did all this research. She found Postpartum International, and she was going to groups like 3 or 4 times a day,
Mm-hmm.
which is beautiful because there's so much great support there.
And this was virtual.
This was virtual, correct?
Uh huh.
And so, and I was happy for her. I was like, yes, go do as many as you need. If you need to do 10 a day, do 10 a day, like whatever we need to do. And so, as she was going through her journey, she actually started to notice that, like, oh, but my husband is also going through this. And then that's when we learned that dads and partners can go through postpartum depression as well. So she told me, she didn't really tell, there's something wrong with you because you're not who you were. So she saw
Uh
it in
huh.
me, and that's the most beautiful thing is that during her lowest point, she was still thinking about me and like seeing me in a light of like, hey, you're not the same Chris that I've known. You need to go talk to the. So I started going to the dads groups, which at the time there was only one dad group a month, and it was at 7 a.m. because it's on. For me, it was 10 a.m. Eastern time, so 7 a.m. Pacific time. So I'd get up at 7 in the morning, and you really had to like because there's only so many slots. You had to sign up very like right away. So I would sign up 2 weeks in advance, and I would just sit in and I'd share my thoughts. And then what I started to do though is because I felt it wasn't enough is I started going to the parents groups. So they had the dads groups and then they have a parents group where, dads and moms can go to these groups. Usually there was no dads, so it was usually just me. But I learned so much because I would just listen to the moms and it really helped me understand what my wife was going through because she could tell me all the time, like, hey, this is what I'm going through, but I wouldn't really register. And then when I would hear other moms talking about it, I was like, oh, my wife is going through that. Oh, wow, this is really huge. This is like, there's a lot of stuff to unpack here. And so we began our journey through Postpartum International or PSI during that time, during those like August of 2021 is when we started like really going to groups.
And so, how old was your daughter at that point when you all finally were able to access help?
She was almost 1 years old.
Wow. Yeah, that's a long journey.
8 months. She was 8 months old when we started to get help.
Okay.
And again, we got zero help from our medical provider at the time. I mean, that's a whole nother story, but we got no help from them whatsoever.
And so, what do you think was the biggest turning point for you specifically to start feeling better? Was it just talking to other parents? Was it a routine that you put into place? Or was there just having this support system? I'm curious what you felt like was the biggest thing to help you start to feel like yourself again.
Yeah, I think it was going to groups, like talking to other dads is really what helps you because you start to realize, oh, I'm not alone in this. Like other dads feel this way. I'm not like weird or I'm not broken. I'm just going through this journey and I need the support from other people. I also actually started therapy as well. So I started talking to a therapist who was helping me unpack a lot more and like learning about like my OCD tendencies and things like that. And so there was a combination of like, just really communicating with my wife better. When somebody would ask you how you're doing, not just saying like, oh, I'm okay, but like really saying like, how are you doing? And then like answering them how I'm doing. And then, whether it's good or bad or, you know, yeah, I'm stressed out. Today was a tough day. Just really being more open and clear. But yeah, I would say like it was a lot of combinations of just like the group therapies, my therapy, and then just openly communicating with my wife better about how I'm feeling.
Mm-hmm. And so, looking back, is there anything that you think, wow, our journey could have been smoother? I could have gotten help sooner. Is there someone who could have helped you? It sounds like maybe that you think the healthcare providers.
Oh, absolutely. I feel like if we had known about like, yeah, we took a pre-birthing class, but that class didn't give us like the real deal to me, in my opinion. In my opinion, like I said, I took away the only thing I took away from that class was some lady bouncing on a ball, making weird birthing noises.
Mm-hmm,
Like,
mm-hmm.
to me, like, it's about connecting with the people who are gonna have a child. Like, because being a new parent is so hard. It's not easy. Even with all the resources that you may have, if you have like a doula or you have like the biggest support group, at some point it's going to be just you, the baby, and the parents and the baby, right?
Mm-hmm,
Like,
mm-hmm.
and it's going to come down to like you have to learn how to handle the stressful situations, and they don't teach you that. And so like that's one of the great things I loved about PSI's like birthing class that they have is they help you with that knowledge of like this is the rough part. So this is how you navigate these waters. Here's a list of all the resources you need. I had no idea about any of the helplines. I had no idea about any of these like support systems. And so I feel like that's where we probably, because my, like, again, my wife is a super organizer. We would have had this stuff like we would have had this thing like nailed if it was if I'm feeling this way, here's the list of numbers to call. Like we didn't have those numbers, and we had to search for them on our own.
And you weren't resistant to getting help. You
Oh,
just didn't
absolutely not.
realize that there was help that you could get, or even maybe that you needed help sooner.
Yeah, I mean, we just didn't know that, like, because we didn't know what we were going through. And
Right.
so like, and I think that's the biggest point is like, oh, like, and again, like, oh, you just had the baby blues, you just had the baby a week ago, you're gonna feel like this. And it's like, okay, but now it's 2 months out, why am I still feeling like this, or why is it getting significantly harder? And there was no answer.
And it's so challenging for women to get help. And then I think if your wife had not been able to even just put all of her own struggles aside to see your struggles, it leaves me wondering, like, how long would you have continued to struggle without her spotting it? Because I think fathers are in an even more unique situation. We've made progress. There's a lot of progress still to be made with maternal mental health. But the paternal mental health, I think it's really not talked about. And so I'm curious what you think the unique challenges are that dads specifically are facing around identifying and getting help for mental health struggles.
I think there's a couple of layers here. There's the generational trauma that we go through as dads, right? We are set that we have to be the cornerstone of the family. We sit at the front of the table, we read our newspaper, we go to work, we pay the bills. We don't have anything to do with what goes on in the household, right? That's not our realm. Our realm is we pay the bills, we take out the trash, we do everything else, right? And there's a wonderful transition happening where dads are like, no, that's not who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And for me specifically, I always knew I was going to be 100% hands on. I was never going to just be like, I'm not changing a diaper. I'm not going to do this. When my daughter was born, I had to ask my wife, how do I wipe her?
Right, right.
I don't know what to do because
Yeah, the parts are different.
yeah, I don't understand it. And she would tell me, she taught me how to do it. And so like there's a level of like I'm afraid to do this because I don't know how to do this, right? But once you start asking questions, once you start taking steps into other areas of like things that we don't normally do, life becomes so much more easy, right? I was excited to change diapers. I am horrible at it. I was horrible at it. I always joke that my tissue count was like 15. My wife's like 2.
Totally.
Like if she's clean, she's clean. But anyways, yeah, so I think there is a level of like asking for help and seeking help that dads are starting to do now. And I think that's what is a beautiful transition from what we were doing, or what I saw my dad do. And this is not a knock against my dad, because he provided for us.
Sure.
He did what he was supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
He worked all the time. He was never really home for dinner because he was working. And, his dad was the same way. His dad was the same way. But now I'm home with my daughter during dinner time. I'm sitting next to my daughter during dinner time. I'm talking to her. I'm engaging with her. And I think that's the beautiful nature of this like transition of like from this generational trauma that we're used to now this beautiful, like, dads are involved, dads want to be involved, but we're still learning how to be involved is really the key, I think.
Right. And so, one of the reasons I love doing episodes around mental health is because inevitably I hear from someone who says, I listened to that episode and it made me realize that I was struggling and that I needed help. And so, I would love to know what you want any expecting or new father to know about paternal mental health, because this might be it. Like you said, they're not talking about it. They might not have a class about it. The hospital they go to may not tell them anything. And so if they stumbled upon this episode or someone sent it to them, what do you want them to know?
Yeah, if you're feeling disassociated from the baby, if you're feeling depressed, if you're feeling angry, if you're feeling, like OCD is kicking in, there is a group for you. There's nothing wrong with you. You're currently going through this journey, and there is a way out. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. It doesn't feel like it at first, and I know because I remember listening to other dads say, like, oh yeah, once you get to this point it gets easier, and I'm thinking, well, I'm in the thick of this right now. It's not easy, and you're absolutely right, it's not easy. But if you're feeling like your communication is low, if you feel like you're disconnected from the baby and the mom, seek help. Talk to somebody. There's wonderful groups out there for you to join. There's other dads like you, and I think that's like 90% of what I hear in my groups when I facilitate groups is I thought I was alone, but I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
the most beautiful thing about it is, and something I tell the dads in my groups is like, we do it virtually, and so when you're seeing other dads, you're seeing dads from all over the country. You're seeing dads from the East Coast, the West Coast, South, North, people you wouldn't expect, and that is the most wonderful thing because we're showing a connection with each other, and it's almost like a fraternity of dads that are like, hey, we're here to help you and support you, and you have that support, so please reach out and look for it. It's there for you.
Right. One of the things I like to say to moms I work with who I can tell are struggling is to remind them that their health matters just as much as their child's. And
Absolutely.
so I think it's important for fathers to know that their health matters just as much as their partner's health and their child's health. And I am so grateful that you have openly shared your story. I know that there are going to be dads who hear this and they will feel seen for the first time and not alone, and partners who may listen and, like your wife, start to think, wow, I actually think my husband might be struggling with postpartum depression or anxiety. And so I think that's powerful as well. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, absolutely. It was wonderful to be here and just again bring light to postpartum depression and men's mental health, women's mental health in general.
Absolutely. Well, as Chris mentioned, Postpartum Support International has resources for both moms and dads. If you're curious to learn more or you want to seek help, you can get help quickly through them. You can head to postpartum.net. I will share that link in the show notes. And if you are struggling, please know that you do not need a diagnosis to seek support. And as Chris said, you are not alone and you will be well again. So thanks again, Chris, and bye for now. Thank you for listening to How Long Till Bedtime. To learn how we can work together to improve your child's sleep, pleep and wellnesscoach.com.